So, Dan, we've got an extension. We're going to see more hostages released over the next 2 days.
Yes, and I would, you never know if it's actually going to come off exactly as planned. You're dealing with Hamas. But I think there's reason to be optimistic. These particular deals, more or less, will come off. To me, the details are one thing, but the bigger picture is worth keeping in mind throughout this entire episode. But even going back years, Israel has never offered the Palestinians an actual carrot that would really seize the world's imagination. If Israel were to say to the Palestinians at large, and also to Hamas.
What about in 2008, Ehud Olmert's offer?
No, I mean under the current government, yes, that was a massive carrot. You're absolutely right. But during the Netanyahu years, they've really offered nothing. So if Israel were to say, in exchange for demilitarizing Gaza and for rejuvenating the Palestinian Authority, we are willing...
Hamas has been in charge. Why would Hamas agree to...
Wouldn't that be a better look for Israel if they were offering something reasonable other than the implication that they're willing to cause as much destruction as is necessary in order to eradicate Hamas? The goal of eradicating Hamas has a lot of worldwide support. The idea that Israel has carte blanche to exact any price upon a civilian population manifestly does not. And so that involves a destruction of Israel's brand internationally that I don't think is in Israel's interest, nor do I think is its strategy or desire. And by the way, I would also factor in that morally it may not be the best policy. And so I really, really think that Israel should offer something positive to the Palestinians.
It wants to destroy Hamas?
To remove them from power and to demilitarize them. And you know what? The Arab world should back such a call. I want to see the Arab world say, no, we don't want Hamas to lay down their arms in exchange for having Gaza become a Singapore. Your choice is Singapore or Somalia. If Israel gave them that choice, Israel would look like it's seizing the initiative, and it probably would have demonstrations in favor of its offer and not against it.
I'm so glad that I have at least one supporter here in the studio.
You're saying that there should be an offer of statehood now following the worst terrorist attack in Israel's history.
Before Israel...
Is that not rewarding?
You know what? Can I please respond?
Is that not rewarding terrorism?
No. What would reward terrorism is to give Hamas what it wants. And what Hamas wants is a single binational state in which they hope the Arabs will eventually be the majority. That is what they want. And that has been the goal of Hamas's actions since the early 90s. When they started bombing buses and pubs in Israel, their goal was to move the public to the right, to scuttle the peace process. And sad to say, they succeeded.
But who would be in charge of this? I mean, President Biden has talked about the Palestinian Authority, about Mahmoud Abbas taking over. Is he the right person to lead Gaza?
Really. Here's the deal. I believe. There's a notion that on October 7th, everything changed because there's consensus now about bringing down Hamas. And sure, that's true tactically. Strategically, nothing has changed. Israel has a choice between either saying, well, we have to control them, else barbarism will follow, which is internal occupation, or we need to partition and divorce from the Palestinians, give them some hope, and give Israel a demographically viable situation. That remains the fundamental choice. There is no other.
So yes, we need a partition. I'm not sure that we can give up the security control over the territories.
Well, we saw what happened when Israel
not in the upcoming years. Maybe later, maybe there will.
Well,
but for the yes, separation, yes.
This is why we say a demilitarized Palestinian entity.
No, you don't have to convince me. I'm totally convinced. It's not only the people in Berkeley and Oxford who are shouting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. It's exactly what the extreme right in Israel is saying. It's exactly. I mean, there is a coalition of people who want one state from the river to the sea.
Here's the
extreme. I mean, anti-Israelis from the left and anti-Zionist from the right.
And for the Palestinian side.
Also
the Palestinian rejectionists and Israeli right wing both want one state from the river to the sea, each believing in its own delusion that its side will control it. And people who want a rational reality here ultimately have to choose some version of partition.
But we have to remember that all the offers by the international community, by, for example, Bill Clinton, 20.
Well, quite. I mean, how many offers of statehood have the Palestinians
it was offered.
5.
No, it was offered.
5. Okay, so what makes you think that anything will be different this time?
I've always argued that it has to be imposed, by the way. Unilaterally. Yes.
No, again.
Imposing democracy?
No, not imposing democracy. Israel needs to, at the end of the day, either make the Palestinians an offer that they can accept, or create a partition of its own volition. The third choice is a default outcome of a non-democratic binational state that will be the end of Zionism. If that's what Israelis want, then that's where they're headed, but I do not think it is. By the way, I absolutely would condition moves towards a partition on a ceasing of accepting things that Israel has hitherto accepted, like demonic educational systems, not only in Gaza, but also in West Bank, that teach the Palestinian youth to hate Jews and have them enact the killings of soldiers.
For a change, I have nothing to add because I agree with every word.
But can I ask you both, who would enforce all of this? Who is
what do you mean? The international community. Who is funding?
The international community?
Who is funding the educational system?
UN? How about the EU?
Who is funding?
UNRWA?
Yeah, no. Who is funding UNRWA? Who is funding the educational
European and
system?
American taxpayers.
Who is funding the Palestinian education? It's the EU. It's the European countries. Enough. It should be a deal, international deal with the EU, with the European countries. No more hatred. No more incitement, because this is part of the problem.
I kind of think that what President Herzog of Israel said, that ultimately there will be a withdrawal, but first there has to be an interim phase with heavy international and multinational involvement. I think that's the only path out of this. And there will be American role, but I don't think military boots on the ground in Gaza are the way to do that.
All right, great to talk to you. Thank you very much, Colonel Richardson. We appreciate it. Dan Perry, just what we were talking about earlier in the reaction to what you heard from Colonel Alton there about the appetite for American boots on the ground in the region.
I don't think America has an appetite for many boots on the ground, nor do I think it would be a good idea to have it be an American occupation force. I do think Gaza will have to be pacified and demilitarized by force. For Israel to do it alone is going to be a very high-cost proposition for Israel, very difficult, and won't have a lot of legitimacy, which is why, if you look at the other boots that I would seek to have on the ground, and it's not just the vulgarity of soldiers with boots on the ground, I mean in a larger sense, involvement in forcing a change in Gaza, I would be looking to the Arab world. I want the Arab world to unite.
Saudi Arabia,
and to call a spade, and to say we will have nothing to do with a bunch of jihadi maniacs running a mafia state in Gaza. We think it's bad for the Palestinians, and therefore we're going to do everything in our conceivable power, including to use whatever leverage we have on Qatar, and of course we know the Sunni world and Qatar have been at loggerheads for much of the past decade, to bring about a change. The idea that there is 1 microgram of benefit that will accrue to the Palestinians because of Hamas, within Arab public opinion, needs to be changed and even eradicated. I think Hamas needs to face maximal pressure. It has to be left with only Iran on its side. And once that happens, when they're that isolated, if the carrot is big enough in terms of the amount of investment that the world will provide the Gazans and the diplomatic landscape that they could benefit from, some version of independence, not 3 centuries down the line, that type of general plan might have some success more than just bombarding Gaza.
And say, yes, the United States will not put boots on the ground, but the United States is part of it. What do you mean? I mean, they are the big actor, actually, in the whole
to the extent that for Israel to offer the Palestinians a carrot in Gaza, they need a reward for Israel. The mega deal with Saudi Arabia can be that reward. A larger scheme that includes a mega deal with Saudi Arabia and the U.S. and a horizon for the Palestinians.
All right, Dan Perry and Ben Yemeni, thank you very much to you both. We're going to take a short break. Stay with us, much more still to come.